Welcome to the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast with psychologist Dr. Doreen Downing. Listen in as Doreen interviews people who felt they didn't have a voice or who suffered extreme speaking anxiety. You'll hear stories about how they struggled to speak up, what they did to find their authentic voice, and the confidence they now feel to speak up and make an impact. If you want to get started right away to find your voice, download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. And now, here is Doreen.
Hi, this is Dr. Doreen Downing, and I'm host of the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast, here today with a wonderful new friend. I'm so excited to introduce you to her, and this is Jami your name is always a little hard for me to say, but it's Carlacio, or say it.
Carlacio.
Carlacio.
Yeah.
Yes. And the reason why I want to introduce you to Jami today is because on the internet, you don't know who you're meeting, and once in a while, I feel myself already, my heart opening. Once in a while, you feel like, there is a beautiful human being, and we've never met face to face. Well, face to face on internet and Zoom, but so I'm really excited about you coming on today and sharing your story. I've heard bits about it, and there's been lots of, well, I'll just say it, lots of trauma that you've experienced. But look at you today, who has gone and lived a life and found a way to, one of the things that we were talking about earlier, shining from within and letting the beauty and the magnificence and being in that, and no matter what the surface is, you shine. Welcome, Jami.
Thank you so much, Doreen. It is a pleasure to be here with you, and I thank you very much for asking me to be on your show.
Yes. Well, you sent me a bio, and I'm going to read it because I think it gives a sense of how accomplished you have become, right?
Yeah. Against all odds.
It is a lot. So I'll read there's a short bio, a long bio, and I'll read the medium one here. Jami Carlacio is a master certified life coach, writer, writing consultant, and international public speaker. After spending about 25 years in academia as a scholar and professor of writing and literature, Jami left to pursue her spiritual calling. I have to take a big breath right there because that's what speaks to me. I think spiritual calling is like there's something inside of us, but we're also listening to the universe, and something was calling you. So anyway, we'll go back to, she coaches women who struggle with self-sabotaging behavior, who are reevaluating their career choices, and who want to develop the self-confidence to choose healthy, affirming personal relationships. She also coaches clients who wish to use writing as a vehicle to express themselves more fully. All right, well, that's the bio that says you are out there, having been in the world, moving yourself along. But it seems like all of us move ourselves along, but we're moving all inside. There's more. We don't just leave behind what happened to us. We carry it with us, even though we're out there pursuing and achieving. Jami,
Yes.
let's just do, I think it's always good to anchor in something about where you grew up and something about your family situation early on. It gives us a sense of a beginning.
Okay. Yeah. So first of all, I would say that we can't judge people by their outsides because we don't always know their insides. And so I say that because oftentimes we think that what's outside is who they are. And we forget that there's this whole inside part that is sort of like, what's below the surface of an iceberg. There's like an eighth above, and then there's, 7/8 below. So I was born in Southern California, and my mother died when I was an infant. And this feeds into the story that's about to come. And so after a few months of my older sister sort of babysitting me while my dad went to work, I had 3 older siblings, and they were much older. My grandmother from Italy, immigrant from Italy, came to stay with me and take care of me. And she was basically the one piece of stability and love in my life. And then when we were visiting my family in Spokane, Washington, where pretty much all of my family lived, she died suddenly of a heart attack when I was 5. And instead of bringing me back to California, my dad left me up in Spokane. And I stayed with an aunt and her kids, my cousins. And I ended up staying in Spokane till I was 21, but it wasn't very nice and easy. And in fact, that's why I live 3,000 miles away from Spokane now. There's a lot of pain there. So I was physically abused and verbally abused. And then my dad ended up marrying someone who was a psychological and verbal abuser. And that was how I grew up. I also experienced people trespassing against me physically and sexually. And that was also part of my story, but I kept it hidden. I kept that hidden. I was ashamed. I thought it was all my fault. I thought there was something wrong with me. And this started when I was 9. So, and it was ongoing. And so and then I was abused. So I was afraid to talk, because if I opened my mouth, that was bad news. I would get in more trouble or something else would happen. So I always felt like I was walking on eggshells. And if anything good happened, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, this can't be good. This can't be good, because something else is going to happen that's going to ruin it. And I grew up afraid of people who were angry and unable to really deal with conflict, because I didn't have that voice. That's why I'm here today. I didn't have a voice. I didn't have any way of standing up for myself, because if I ever did attempt to do that, it ended up in repercussions that I didn't want. And so I went through life like that for a very, very decades. I went through life like that. And even by the time I was 12, I felt so worthless and so unlovable that I started using alcohol and other drugs to assuage the pain and to feel like I fit in. So if other people were drinking, then I would join in. If other people were doing another substance, I would join in, because it felt like if I did those things, then people would love me. And I ended up using alcohol as a salve for 25 years. And it was the thing that made the pain go away for a short while. But what it ended up doing was making the pain worse, because at some point I couldn't stop drinking. And it was the only thing that I felt like I had that made my life bearable. But at the same time, it made my life unbearable. So I was fortunate enough to hit a bottom, a spiritual bottom. We often say there's a God-shaped hole inside. We try to fill it with spirits that come in a bottle, but ultimately what really fills that hole is a spirit, a divine spirit.
That what you just said about the the spirits and the irony of it being called alcohol being called spirits. I never really saw that until what you just described. Well, first let me respond, because that was a lot of life that you pointed to that listeners are going to say, yeah, I'm sure that so many people have found themselves in a life that they didn't choose. That's part of what I hear, what happened for you. And wow, what a lot of loss so early. And I think that in our early years is when we start to develop our inner sense of self. And that didn't happen. And obviously not all the time, but moms are usually a good source of nourishment and feeding us our goodness early on, so just even just being wrapped, held by by people who love us. It feels like that helps our brains realize the world is a safe place. My goodness, Jami, I didn't realize that there was so much that has um, happened so early in your life, and that the idea, what you pointed to, voice, not having a voice, because that would be jeopardizing you. It would be endangering you if you had a voice.
Yeah, absolutely. And so funnily enough, the work I do now is about giving people voice. It's about amplifying voices that have been silenced, because mine was. And writing has been a vehicle for me, and speaking about my scholarship has been a vehicle for me. And it has been a long, long journey. It wasn't an easy journey at all, but I guess I finally felt like I I wrote when I was filling out some forms for you, one of the things I wrote was, this is the first time I'm really going public with a lot of things that have happened to me. And so this is the first time I'm actually really divulging to the public some of the events in my life that have made me who I am today.
I love that sense of made me who I am, because I think that's what you do as a coach, and what this whole podcast is about, is saying, hey folks, if you have suffered, it doesn't mean that life is not yours for the taking somewhere down the line, because it's all of what we experience is something that gives us something. So what would you say this these challenges and these abuses and these these places where you weren't valued and you weren't loved, what do you think that how did that make you more of who you can be?
I'll tell you, there were definitely a lot of times in my life where I was asking God, what's going on? Why is this happening to me? I need help, and I can't bear it anymore. But
Uh,
what happened is, this is Jami Carlacio's philosophy, and it may be other people's, but this is what makes sense to me. Somewhere along the line, the things that happened to me had to happen, or I wouldn't be able to help the people I help. In other words, there's no way I could be a life coach, or I was a chaplain, I was a professor, I mentored students, I help women who are recovering from addiction. I used to volunteer in prisons and jails to work with women. And none of that would have been possible had I not had the same experience. So I have training in suicide prevention, mental health, first aid, sexual assault, crisis counseling, because those things enable me to hold my hand out to people who people held their hand out to me, and I feel like I traveled over some hot coals, but there were women holding their hand out to me. And so I feel compelled and called to hold my hand out for the next woman or women who
uh,
need that.
yeah, the trust, they talk about know, like, and trust. And I think that knowing somebody has had the same experience or has had violations, and that you can trust, that especially if they're a light, like a beacon, you're like a beacon ahead of a lot of people who are saying, I want out of this, or I want to move away. And how? And you mentioned bottom, uh, that there was a spiritual bottom. Say a little bit more about that.
I wanted to take my life. I was miserable. I
Mm.
was miserable. And the only way I thought I could do it was if I just kept drinking. And so I drank more and I drank more.
Uh,
And what happened was, when I was at that really dark night, I saw a pinprick of light, and light always pierces the darkness. Darkness can never overcome light. And I think that pinprick of light was love. I think it was my grandmother, my Italian grandmother, who took care of me for 5 years. I think that saved me. And I also attribute it to my higher power, which I call God, because the way I understand God, God is love. And so there was love there that saved me. And that love was the thing that ultimately I found myself able to do for myself. Because I couldn't love myself. I didn't love myself. I didn't think anyone else loved me. But my higher power loved me enough to save me. And that's how I continued to stay sober. And it's the kind of love I want to give to other people who don't feel loved.
Oh, thank you. That's really beautiful, amazing kind of learning, and then the kind of commitment you have, and it comes from your deep, deep life experience plus uh, a higher power. What you just said about your grandmother, because I'm thinking about voice, and that voice is more than just the sound or words.
Yeah.
Voice, I think, is like from the soul, or voice comes from love. I mean, don't you think that there's a sense that your grandmother represented some voice for you to hear?
Yes, absolutely. So I believe she was there to implant that seed, even though it got covered up with a lot of dirt over the years. That seed was there, sort of like a mustard seed. It's small, it's very tiny, but it grows big. And eventually the dirt sort of started to come away, and the little mustard seed was able to grow. So I attribute the fact that I am here today to that grandmother. I called her Gama, rhymes with mama. And I attribute that I was able to survive because that was still in there somewhere. It was just buried.
Yeah. And in terms of what voice means to me, we listen to it. And even though it wasn't, like I'm saying, even though it wasn't something that you hear and it's a sound, it's a sense. And I think this deeper idea about voice being more of like you said, there was a spiritual calling. That means that's a voice, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I hear it. I hear it today. I hear it all the time. I meditate every day, and I try to just quiet the crazies in my head to hear that voice. And that voice is the thing that tells me, go here, go to this place, do this thing. So I definitely hear it. And that is the voice that empowered me. And so, I still remember all the little songs that my grandmother taught me, and the things that she said to me, and, hugging me and playing on her lap, and, dam in the bacia, it's give me a kiss. It's very, very idiomatic Southern Italy, not perfect Italian, but, those kinds of loving phrases have always stayed with me. And I have a child. And so I want him to know that he's loved no matter what, anytime, any day, that it doesn't matter if he makes a mistake or if he's in a grouchy mood. I will always love him, and I will always tell him that.
Yes, yes. So that spiritual awakening, what happened next?
Well, when I was 8, I wanted to be a priest. I was a Catholic. I ended up leaving the Catholic Church and becoming an Episcopalian in my 50s. But I felt really called to be a priest, and you can't be a priest if you're a woman in the Catholic Church. So I always had these incipient feminist sentiments, but I ended up staying as a Catholic. I went to a Catholic university, and I always befriended people who were religious or spiritual. And I always knew in the back of my head that I wanted to do that, but I never thought it was truly possible. And in my 20s, I read a book, and the main character in the book was a professor at a divinity school. And I thought, I want to go to divinity school, but I never quite believed it would ever happen. And then I moved from New York City to the New Haven area in Connecticut, and I realized Yale Divinity School was right down the road. So I applied and got in, and I realized finally that I was home. I was finally home. And that is where kind of all of my spiritual calling finally coalesced in earning a Master of Divinity degree and then becoming a chaplain for a while. I didn't get ordained in the end, but I did do chaplaincy work. And so I'm also doing a certificate in spiritual direction with the Spiritual Life Center in West Hartford, Connecticut now, because I feel like I have the calling. And the Holy Spirit said, Jami, you don't need a caller to do what you're going to do for me.
Oh,
Because I
oh,
used to had to have the collar, I had to be a priest, and the Holy Spirit said, no, you don't need that.
uh-huh.
You have what I gave you, so use it.
Mm. Well, let's talk about how you are using it nowadays. Would like to have people be able to contact you and to hear more if they need to. So what's happening nowadays? And if there's a
Well,
way you want to move towards, if there's something else about the story and finding your voice and being who you are today, let me know that too.
okay, so I will, because this is very important. So I taught writing for many years, from the early 90s until 2018. I was either a professor or a lecturer in colleges and universities. And so by teaching writing, I was helping other people to have a voice and to express that. And I I uh, I did an edited collection on Toni Morrison, and Toni Morrison was a Nobel laureate. She's very famous, and she passed away a few years ago. But her books were all about giving voice to all of the people who had suffered the effects of enslavement in history. And so I managed to bring out a book that helped other people teach her work, because it's very difficult. And then most recently, I completed an edited collection entitled Activism in the Name of God, Religion and Black Feminist Public Intellectuals from the 19th Century to the Present. And there are 12 chapters giving voice to Black women throughout history from the 19th century to the present, who spoke up, who sang, who marched, who wrote poetry, who opened schools. And they used their voice to lift up Black women, lift up Black men, call out racism and call out injustice. And a lot of these people have been marginalized and forgotten. So I guess I use my work to amplify other voices. And I still write, and I still help people use their writing to tell their stories. And so, yeah, I have a YouTube channel, and I have, a LinkedIn page. It's easy to get a hold of me there. And I have a website. It's empoweredlifecoaching.me. And so I want to also help people, besides the life coaching. I want to help people who want to use writing to find their voice as a healing way. A lot of people who have trauma need to be able to find an outlet, and writing is often that kind of cathartic outlet. So
Yeah, I would say that it's healing. Writing is healing. You're right. And that the process of first listening to yourself and then being able to find that what's inside the truth, and then be able to put it out and moving it out onto paper is still not public, and that's scary for people. But I think that at least that first step of finding the voice and then I guess writing it is a way of actually moving it out from inside to at least put it outside and on paper.
because sometimes people can't verbalize, because the pain
Yes.
is there, or just for whatever. I mean, this is kind of the work you do, is helping people, giving voice to people, giving them that encouragement and that strength, and saying, here, find your voice, change your life.
Mhm.
And sometimes the voice has to come out in writing, and maybe it can come out later verbally.
Yes, I was just doing a keynote at a writers conference, and it
Mhm.
was about helping people who have found their voice in writing, but
Mhm.
here the book is out, and they have to, not have to, but in order to move it even further out into the world, they need to speak about it, like at events or sometimes at stores or whatever is being asked of them. So yes, that was a fun process to teach people about taking their writing and being comfortable in the same way that they are about finding their voice in terms of what the truth is that they want to say, but how to, you use the word verbalize, how to verbalize, and where do you need to be inside of yourself if you're speaking about pain. And in a way, you modeled it today, Jami, that there is unspeakable things that have happened, yet you can speak about them.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the thing. I feel like I'm giving permission. Other people gave me permission through their writing or through their speaking, and you give permission. And I don't mean that it's about allowing, but if I say something out loud that exposes my vulnerability or exposes some kind of trauma that I've had, that I've overcome through a lot of help and a lot of therapy. I did not do this alone. It took a real village to get me where I am today. But me exposing myself may make it easier for somebody else to do the same in a way that I can now speak my truth. And I'm hoping other people can say, yeah, she said something and that resonated with me. And Brene Brown does this all the time. She is the person who gives people permission and encourages people to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. And I guess one more that I think about you and what you do for people and to give them permission is that there's a safety,
Yes.
the kind of listening and love that comes from you. It feels like that it's an environment in which people feel like there isn't judgment. It's safe to finally have a listener that knows.
Yep, you're right. It is listening and not judging. It's in chaplaincy, we call it a ministry of presence. Sometimes we go to a room, listen to a patient, and we don't have to have any answers. We just are present with them and we listen and we hear their story. And oftentimes people just need to be heard.
Yes. Oh, that's beyond therapy. It's life-giving.
Yeah, it is.
Well, we're coming to the end. I know you gave people how to get a hold of you. Was that Empowered Life Coaching at .me?
EmpoweredLifeCoaching.me. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
great. Well, I'm going to give you one last moment here to see what might want to be said to close this time together today.
Okay, well, thank you. I think the main thing is it's hard, but it can be done. If we dig deep down, we are all made for love. We are created in love. We are created by love. And if we can just hold on to that and remember that all there really is love. All the other stuff is noise. But if we can hang on to the fact that we were created in love and that that's the source of our being, then I think we have the answer, to a life worth living.
Thank you so much, Jami.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being with us today for this episode of Find Your Voice, Change Your Life. Each person during interviews shares what has helped them find their voice. You can learn from these guests and find your voice so you can be confident to speak up and speak out. And remember to download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. We hope you enjoyed the show and will return next time. Until then, goodbye for now.